Hey, this is Saka Hitman, Country Manager for LHH in New Zealand. If you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Dennis Giannoutzos.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutzos.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey, listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and today I have a guest with me. His name is Saka Hitman, and Saka is a global experienced executive in the areas of business transformation, change management, organisational restructuring, and business process outsourcing. As country manager for Lee Hecht Harrison in New Zealand, Saka works with managing directors, senior HR managers, and other key stakeholders to plan, negotiate, and implement large-scale restructures, downsizes, and career management projects spanning the public and private sectors covering all industries. Previously, Saka worked for American Express Advisory Services, providing a mix of management consultancy and e-commerce solutions. But wait, listeners, he does something else outside of work as well, and he is the Honorary Consul to the Kingdom of the Netherlands as an extension to the Dutch Embassy in New Zealand. And he's also graduated from the School of Management in the Netherlands, and I'm sure he's going to tell us a little bit more about that. But Saka, hey, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, Dennis. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Hey, so I've just given a quick introduction about you and a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, Dennis, you already raised iconic point there on the Netherlands. So I was born and raised in Friesland, which is a separate province in the northern part of the Netherlands, on a dairy farm. And, my parents were people of very humble beginnings. They started their farm. It's a family farm, 3 generations now. Hard work and to advance in life, that was necessary, and they instilled a strong sense of learning for me in that time as well. I was not really a farmer. I was obviously the farmer's son, but I was not a farmer at heart. And I went on from going from the most northern part of the Netherlands to the most southern part of the Netherlands to a hotel school because I was really keen on food and drink, which I still am. And I did a Bachelor of Hospitality Management in the hotel school in Maastricht, where also a great treaty was signed, a beautiful Roman city. And during that time, I had the opportunity to travel and do internships, which gives you the practical side of the degree. And went to France twice. And the second time I was in France, I met a lovely lady who I followed all the way down to New Zealand. So I met Deborah in Paris, but we ended up in Christchurch, where I originally worked in hospitality. Strangely enough, that was in the 1990s. It's a very different world from what New Zealand is today. And hospitality was really not a career. Hospitality was just to get you through university, as my kids are doing at the moment. And I invested a lot of money and time and effort in that degree, which was supposed to get you started at a management level, because all that effort that had gone into it. And basically, when I arrived in Christchurch, I I started at the Park Royal as basically running a cocktail bar. Very useful, when you like to throw a party. But not exactly sort of the level where I would like to have started. So it did ground me in learning about life in New Zealand and how that went. But I felt impatient, and Deborah, my wife, finished her degree at that time, and then I said, let's venture back to Europe, and we went on a journey there, and we said, let's just go for a couple of years. We stayed 17 years in the Netherlands. I moved from hospitality into tourism, and from tourism into, I guess, the time that I started at American Express was more getting into consultancy. And that's where, I guess, the leadership side of things started for me as a person.
Okay, cool. So you've gone from very humble beginnings, then you were at the north of the Netherlands, went to the south of the Netherlands, and then you went all the way to the south of the world, down to New Zealand to follow a lovely lady, and then, of course, into other things too, cocktails, hospitality, and taking you into other areas as well. So that's pretty cool, and very good. So how did you actually get into leadership? I mean, you mentioned it just a little briefly there, but how did you actually get into it?
I had an interview at the time with a guy in Amsterdam. Amsterdam had quite a large American Express office, but the decision had to be not really approved, but at least have a second opinion by the executive vice president and managing director for American Express in the Benelux. So I drove to Brussels for that interview, and the lady was called Michelle Douwer, and it was more rubber stamping my role, but I didn't know that. I was quite nervous for the interview. And the first thing she said to me, well, I think this will be the beginning of your real career.
Huh.
And actually, I was quite a bit offended and taken back by that, to be honest. But I think in retrospect, I've almost worked 10 years for Amex and the Blue Box. I think it was definitely true. I had done a lot of management, but I hadn't done a lot of leadership. So in essence, she was right.
Okay, so the beginning of your real career. Wow, interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And so tell me, I'm sure there may have been several people, but who's your favorite leader? Now, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
Well, then, for obvious reasons, you probably will be able to understand that I can't give you just one. I think I thought about this long and hard over the weekend when you asked me to come on this show. And I have to say that Ken Chenault, the CEO at American Express during the time that I was there, has been a great inspiration and a great leader. Also in this day and age of diversity and inclusion, it's great to have a man like that to look up to, and it was a real privilege. I had the opportunity to meet him 3 times. Now, these moments, as you will understand, are not very long, so I had probably on total maybe 10 minutes with him. But I think what struck me really, first of all, he's a really nice guy, very, very down to earth, very humble in a way as well. But I think what I learned from him is that it's really key to focus on the customer and to focus on building a brand. It's important to keep your eye on the ball with the customer. And he used the words that people like to connect emotionally and rationally to a service and a product. And particularly that emotional connection, I think, is really important and is something that I've carried with me in my career and definitely working for LHH here in New Zealand, where our brand is not as well known. I've always gone back to that. It's, do your best with your customers, keep your focus there. The other thing that he has done over the time that he's been there is constantly reinventing the company. I mean, American Express is about 160 plus years, and you need to reinvent yourself to stay current in the marketplace. And the other thing that I was really quite amazed by at the time when I just started working there is, he said it's okay to make a mistake. Make a lot of mistakes, but not the same ones all the time, because from the mistakes you learn and you will progress. But he says, whatever you do, never tarnish the brand. So those are sort of a few things that he brought along. And I just wanted to share with you, because I went back and watched an interview that he did in 2014, and he was reflecting on 9/11 and and obviously the awful loss of life on some of our colleagues. There were 17 of them. who were lost in the Twin Towers there. But he said at the time also, the hard part of being a leader around layoffs is really difficult. And I thought that is really relevant in today's time with COVID and a lot of companies making those hard decisions. And he said the challenge of leadership during this time is being decisive and compassionate at the same time. And what struck me as well from that interview, he said that people need to both tell the truth and don't talk down on people. And you have to explain the reason why. And I thought that was quite poignant, particularly since we are seeing such a lot of change currently in the market, not just here, but over the world.
Yeah, let me ask a question around what you just shared before about what he said around keep reinventing yourself, meaning I think more the company is reinventing itself. But would that also be true for you as a leader, as an individual, having to reinvent yourself on a regular basis?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think in any role and in any new responsibility, you'd learn new things. And I mean, I don't know quite how I would say that, but you meet yourself when you grow, when you go through that as a leader. You come across situations that you might not have dealt with before. And when I came to New Zealand with American Express, which was fantastic, they family, cats, and all were taken back to New Zealand. A couple of years later, unfortunately, I was hit by a restructure myself, and my role was moved to Singapore, and we'd chosen as a family not to want to move. And I had to reinvent myself. I came from, as I said at the beginning, hospitality, tourism. In the advisory services side, it was all around procurement and that side of things. And I didn't really have a finance background. I just dabbled in it for a little bit with a local company in New Zealand. But in the end, I ended up with a recruitment company with Randstad initially, and now LHH is part of the wider Adecco group. So, yeah, you do need to adapt to the situation and reinvent yourself.
Yeah, and I think what you talked about before is that you probably develop yourself, you go out and do things that you may not have done past, but you also will meet yourself, as you said. Probably you become that person, that leader, and also it's a maturity thing too, which is interesting to see. So, Saka, the show is called Leadership is Changing. What does that mean for you when I say that statement?
I thought about it long and hard. I actually think that I don't necessarily think that leadership is changing so much. I think that the world we live in is changing very rapidly. I mean, COVID has shown that fourth industrial revolution, technology, innovation, staying on top of normal things like your competition, and being under the spotlight of social media are all sort of things that impact leaders. I think when it boils down to it, I think, and you had Vince Molinaro in your show earlier on, and he talks about leadership as a decision. You need to make it. It's an obligation. It's hard work, and you can't do it on your own. I think all those behavioral, I would call them behavioral, are really relevant in today's world. And some of it might not be completely revolutionary, but it is really important to do those things right. And I'd like to add maybe that, when I grew up as a kid, as I said, on that farm, my dad would always say, do what you say you're going to do and act with integrity and be humble. And I think that has helped me to come a long way.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, excellent. Well done. Hey, so tell me, how has your business or industry changed, and what demand has that put on you and your team?
For those listeners who are not familiar with LHH, we're fundamentally a coaching organization, and in the current climate, the demand for our services are huge. And whether that is career development or, as I said, our placement or transition services, leadership coaching, or helping leaders navigate and lead through change, all of that is really important at the moment. And the impact that it has on our business is that because the demand is high and there is a lot of competition from all different sorts of fields, we have to move a lot faster and smarter and deliver innovation and technology that underpins our practice at much greater speed than we have done before. You might have heard about the launch and rollout of Ezra, which has been a result of that need. But yes, it is the speed at which things happen, and trying to stay on top of that I think is what our industry is impacting.
Okay, very good. And if there was one thing that you could change in business as a leader today, what would that one thing be for you?
If I focus on the New Zealand market in particular, I think what is really great about New Zealand is that we're a small market, we're very agile people. I think we adapt quickly to technology, to products and services. I think we've got quite a nimble mindset here, which is great because we can try things out and we can run with them. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. We'll start all over again. And so it's a really good testing ground. And New Zealand is a market of very few large corporates and lots of small, medium enterprise. And the one thing that is a little bit of a bugbear for me is that Kiwi companies do not, in my view, have long enough horizon looking at their people and investing in people. We know as a company how much investment is going on when companies want to protect their employer brand, when they want to, mitigate litigation, when they go through restructures and they spend money on that. I think by adjusting some of that budget to more focusing on retraining, reskilling, and giving employees career guidance to a new future, as I said earlier on as well, that future focus is really important. And I think if you do that, and we have a few companies who are starting to work with LHH at the moment doing that. It's early beginnings, but I think that will definitely help the company and the employee.
Okay, that's great. I'm asking you as the leader, what would you change? What would you like to change?
What would I change?
Yeah, I'm not. Are we talking about you as a leader, Saka? I'm interviewing you. So what would you change?
I would put a stronger focus on ongoing learning, and that doesn't happen enough. And that includes doing that for myself. I don't think I've put any effort in my own personal development over the past, 3 to 4 years, and to remain current in the marketplace. I think that's where we need to focus more on. And that's the same for coaching, actually, being in a coaching environment. Not having my own personal coach, for example, is you could consider that's something that I could change.
So ongoing learning is something that all leaders should look at. If there's one thing you could change in business today, that would be to have ongoing learning, to remain current, focus on the things that you might need to learn to be able to run your business today and be in the industry for sure. Yeah, good. Okay, that's good. Thank you. And so and I know employers. We've got friends who are employees. Yeah, you are probably an employee of an organisation. So how has employees' expectations of leaders changed?
Quite a bit, I think, particularly already because of the demographics of people that we need to work with. So, I mean, probably there's enough said about the millennials and versus my own generation, Generation X. I think people have different motivators to go to work, and I think that is something that can be a bit of a headache for leaders in today's world. For the young leaders, it's probably harder to understand the older leaders and vice versa. So there's a bit of mentoring required both ways. And I think the other thing that is definitely changing is the working arrangements people have with their employer. So some will be,
right.
And I don't mean virtually or physically in an office. I mean more. Some people will come in for a project for 6 months, and someone else has been working there for 10 years, and someone else is bringing in a contractor. So those kind of arrangements require a different form of leadership as well. And I think the art of influencing is really more and more important in a leader than telling people what to go and do, because people won't.
Yeah,
you have to go to those motivators and help people understand. And it's the win-win for everyone that you need to try and find.
Yeah, very good. Oh, that's good. Some good things there. And there are different motivations for different people at all ages, right? Right across the spectrum for sure. Yeah. Hey, so Saka, what makes a leader successful today in this fast-paced, ever-changing world? Because it's moving fast, right? So what makes a leader successful today?
I come back to some of the things that I've heard other leaders in your show say. I think what's really key to me is being transparent as a leader. I think being your authentic self, take your authentic self to work. I mean, it's talked a lot about, but it is important. People can perform better that way. I think a positive attitude helps. I mean, if you don't really want to be there, then, maybe it's time to find something else to go and do. Positive attitude is really important.
Do you mean like go to a cocktail bar type scenario and go make cocktails?
Not like that's could be a nice side interest. Maybe to get the team motivated at Christmas time.
Yeah. Hey, when you say being your authentic self, what do we mean by that?
Well, as you can hear, I'm not a Kiwi. I've worked in different countries, and in the beginning, you're worried about how you sound, how you come across, or how we Dutch people do things. You take that with you, and initially when I came to New Zealand, people said I was way too direct in my communication. I was too. I mean, we're entrepreneurs in the Netherlands, so I like to build a business, and therefore we need to sign contracts and agreements with one another. And some of our customers that I've dealt with, or are now customers of ours, have told me that, I'm a bit too direct and too salesy. And so, you can adjust, but you need to remain yourself to be able to keep on going as a leader as well. So you have to find a fine balance between those two. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, that's brilliant. So that balance is really important because, I think if people see that you're not being your authentic self, that they can, there's that other word you use about being transparent, right? So people can see right through you if you're not being authentic, for sure. And it just doesn't come across very well at all. No. Yeah. And what about the positive attitude? What can people do? I mean, I know we talked about laughed about the cocktail bar, but what can people do? What can leaders who are listening to this show right now, anywhere in the world today, and what could they do to have a positive attitude?
Well, some of it you're born with, I guess, right? Half glass full, empty kind of thing. But I one thing that I did learn in my sales career is that, when you try to get to a deal and it's not working for yourself, you have to go through those stages and for acceptance, all the change stuff that we do as well in our practice. You need to go through quickly so that you can focus again. Okay, well, this one was not meant to be, right? So move on and start again. Pick yourself up, and that brings that resilience is required in sales, but it's also required in lots of other jobs.
Yeah, very good. Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. So there was 3 things: transparency, authentic self, positive attitude. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, definitely that client focus is really important. With our clients, we don't have a team to manage, so we need to be customer focused.
Yeah, I think leaders, the clients are very important for us indeed. So I'm going to get you to get out your crystal ball now. I mean, so I'm going to get you to start thinking about the future. And the question I've got for you is, where do you see leadership being in 5 years from now?
That's the hardest question that you sent through, I thought. I think you will see change happening a lot faster going forward. And so I think for leaders to operate in that kind of environment, they have to provide clarity, I think, first and foremost. So, and of course, leaders should always do that, but I think it becomes more and more fundamental, I think. And they need to provide a clear path through the maze of complexity for the people who they lead. And they need to do so at speed. And that requires good communication skills, empathy, just-in-time decision-making. You have to be comfortable with that, and that requires resilience, as I mentioned before. And so I guess it's really important that when you do step up to be a leader, that you do that with the right intent. And otherwise, you should remain a personal contributor or a great expert in your field, because that is required of leaders, I think.
Yeah. Tell me more about the right intent. What do we mean by that?
Well, as we talked about transparency, all the changes that are hitting a company at the moment, you if you share that you have the right intent with where you're taking your business, people will trust you as a leader, and you need that trust because of the speed in which you need to make decisions. Leaders will trip up from time to time, and you need to be able to explain that to the people who are following you. And I think, that's what I mean with it.
And I think you go back to the leader that you talked about before, your favorite leader, and that you talked about how he said to making a decision with compassion, right? And at the same time, it's really good. And I think that's really important. But the other thing you said too about trust, that is a huge one. And I think through the pandemic, and I don't know whether you've seen it by talking to various executives around the place, but I think with trust and going through the pandemic we had, those organizations that had very good trust or had a certain level of trust or foundation of trust were able to adapt quickly. Did you see that at all? What was your thoughts, Nate?
Yes. Well, we've just had politics here coming to a conclusion over the weekend, and I think you can see that if that is not there, then things fall apart, and you have that in business as well. So that trust is essential to as a leader.
Yep. Yeah.
And it doesn't happen overnight either. You need to do that with every small interaction you build towards the bigger trust piece as a leader.
So there's no magic pill to take to say, ta-da, we've got trust. It does take time, as you say. You have to build it over time. But it's even in the small cases as well, small scenarios, the small things that actually start to build and accumulate around that trust, I think, which is important. Yeah. Excellent. Hey, Saka, thank you for joining us on the show today. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
Best way through LinkedIn, and I have a very unusual surname, so I'm sure you'll find me in the phone book if you need to in New Zealand as well.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us. The show's been brilliant to have you on as a guest.
Thank you very much for having me. Very much enjoyed it.
Excellent. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant, and change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown, the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they're being released and download them and have a listen to them and put a review and a rating. Feel free to share them with your friends in your network. Hey, if there's some feedback you'd like to give me on the show, or if there's a question you'd like to send my guests for them to answer, or if there's a question you have for myself on the Ask Dennis episode, which is a freestyle episode happening once a week, send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Hey, listeners, great for you to tune in with us today on the show. Great to have you here. Thanks for tuning in, and bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.